meaning the tree tastes the same as the fruit. And you can imagine the tree isn't a great delicacy. It's quite bitter. So, esrog is nothing to write home about. The arava, this is the weeping willow, and we see it growing here and there, but the main reason why people grow them is in order to have arava or sukkot. That's why we grow them in our gardens mainly. Doesn't have any smell or any taste. Not very. It's not a very exceptional growth. And the hadassim, well, hadassim have a good smell, but so do many other things. Lavender, rosemary, Louisa. There are many things that have a very good smell, and hadassim are not in any way unique in that sense. And therefore, we have to understand what's this combination of 4 species that we take. What's special about them? What do they represent? And I know there are many midrashim about this, and I'll come to the midrashim a bit later. But even before the midrashim, on a simple level, what is it that we want that we take all of these different meaning? What do they represent? So we spoke yesterday that the whole of the month of Tishrei, the entire month, starting from Rosh Hashanah and finishing with Shmini Atzeres, the entire month represents the beginning of a new cycle, right? We're finishing the previous cycle. That's why it's called B'tzeis Hashanah, and it's called B'tkufat Hashanah. This is the end of an old cycle where we're harvesting the produce on Sukkot, and we're bringing it home, and we're preparing the way for the next cycle of life, the next cycle of the year. And I say specifically cycle of life, because the year is a cycle of life. Life is something that represents the Ritzayin Hashem in the world. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants is life. The Pasuk says, Chayim birtzonot. His will is life. If you ask anybody, right, what's God's will? Right? In one answer, one word, life. Chayim birtzonot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants life. And life works in a cycle. All right, in the winter, things tend to die out, and then they're born again in the spring, and then they teem with life in the summer, and then in the autumn they begin again to decay and to deteriorate, and then we go back to the winter. And that cycle of life is true for everything. It's true for the animal world in a certain sense. Snakes, they go to sleep in the winter, correct? And they're awake in the summer. And so are we. We have these long winter nights where we sleep a lot. And we have these short summer nights when we're awake much more. Life comes in a cycle. The year is a cycle of life at the end of the day. And it represents this rebirth of life. In all of the Yomim Noraim, we're more busy with life, I think, than anything else. Suddenly we're very busy. Zachreinu l'chayim, melech chafetz b'chayim, v'kosfeinu b'sefer ha'chayim, and so on. All of the additions that we bring into Shemona Esrei, most of our tefillas that are related to ourselves are all related to chayim, right? V'sheinu v'y l'chayim. And if we think about the idea of the Chagei Tishrei, the festival of Chodesh Tishrei, the whole idea of them is to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu into our natural lives. We live a natural life. We live a natural existence. And one way of looking at our natural existence is to take it for granted, is to say that it's self-understood. The most extreme expression of this is what the Torah says, Koichi ve'oitzem yodi, it's all because of me. Or parai li hayar ve'aniasi sini. I wrote it. I made it. Right? The Ya'ar is mine. The Nile is mine. And I made it. I fashioned it myself. Right? To take things as being self-understood. And by the way, that's also Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah looks at the world and says the world is self-contained. It's a self-contained system. And God, in the Avodah Zarah version, in the pagan system, is a part of the world. It's a part of the forces of nature, right? We can press the right buttons and bring down whatever it is that we want within the natural world. If you look at the Greek, right, pantheon, the Greek gods, they're all a part of nature, right? They're fighting around just like we are. They have similar nature and similar dispositions to us, and they wield control over different elements of the world, whether it's power or love or wealth or whatever it might be. And they're a part of the world. And that's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. The entire Torah means to bring all of life, all of the forces of life, all of what life brings, and to introduce into it, to inject, to infuse everyday life with a relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the whole Torah is. And that's what we do in the festival of Tishrei, starting from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, like I spoke about yesterday. That Sukkot, the idea is that we take all of our harvest, all of the joy, all of our experience, and we say everything depends on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all, we depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Arba Minim, the 4 species that we take on Sukkot, I think are the ultimate expression of life. Life in the sense of, in the plant world, obviously, these are not animals, these are the plant world, but in a way which is true also for the animal world and also for us. And what are those expressions of life? Life, I think, has 4 basic expressions, and the 4 expressions of life are all manifest in the Arba Minim, in the 4 species. One expression of life is that it's able to defy the forces of nature. It's able to go against the stream. In this sense, against gravity, right? Life is something which is supernatural. It's above and beyond the basic forces of the world. Things grow, they grow upwards. They grow against nature, against gravity. And the greatest expression of that is the palm tree. The palm tree is a tree that grows till very high, right? We know, I don't think Ramat Bed doesn't have so many palm trees. We have one here. Thank you. Where I live, Ramat Aleph is full of palm trees. There's another one there. Oh, there are many palm trees here. Nice. Good. You see, you have to open your eyes to see these things. So we have palm trees here. And if you look at the way they grow straight up without any branches, without bearing any fruit. Everything happens very high up. And there's a certain element of the palm tree that expresses this growth, this going far up into the sky, vertically, and that is the lulav, right? The lulav expresses this vertical growth. The whole lulav is itself a kind of mini palm tree, as it were, right? It's this stick that goes up. And therefore the lulav expresses this quality of life, that it's able to defy the basic forces of the world. And that's true, of course, for any growth, right? Anything which grows, anything that's able to move is magical, right? It's not inert. It's something that moves. It's something we can't create such things. We can't create life. It's something which has a certain magical force. But it's true also on a human level, that we're able to overcome our tendencies towards whatever it is, sleep, and towards, right? The Mesilas Yesharim says, Ofra is a chomris gas, loosely translated. Physicality tends towards a very coarse laziness, a coarse inertia. And we're able to overcome that. Life is able to overcome that. And that's one element of life that the Torah I think, represents through the lulav. But there are various other elements of life. Another element of life is that it's teeming. It's teeming with activity. You see this sometimes when we look at, we can look at many things and observe this. You can see this with ants, for example, a swarm of ants or of bees, teeming with activity, teeming with life. You can see this on a New York street when it's not in the middle of the Corona period. You see hundreds, thousands of people walking together, active, doing, busy, right? Life is teeming, life is active. And in plant life, the species that demonstrates this the most is the hadassim. The Torah doesn't tell us to take hadassim. The Torah tells us to take anaf eitz avos. Avos means it's thick. If you look at a hadass plant, it's full of leaves. Even each branch, you can't see the branch, it's so full of leaves. And then the plant itself, the growth of the hadassim, is that it's teeming with growth. It's full. Anaf eitz avot, it's thick. It's a real thick of branches, of leaves. Anaf eitz avot. And that's another quality of life, that it's teeming, that it's thick, that it's full, right? The fullness of life, the activity of life, another aspect of life. Another part of life, which I think is represented in the Arba Minim, is beauty. Life is beautiful. If you reflect on life, on the different, parts of life that are found in the creation, that are found in the world, life has a beauty to it. And the beauty of life is represented by the esrog. The esrog is supposed to be a pre-eitz hadar. Hadar, beautiful, right? Hidur, hadar. The Gemara has several drashos on the word hadar. But the simple meaning is that it's beautiful. And that's the whole point of the esrog. I know that we're very busy with halachic details, right? That it shouldn't have any spots and that it shouldn't, the pitum should be nice and whole and so on and so forth. But basically, what we want from the esrog is that it should be beautiful. It should be a pleasure to look at it. It's something that we should revel in its beauty, right? The esrog. And the esrog represents the part of life that's beautiful. It has a beauty. And the fourth element of life is that life is thirsty, right? It's thirsty. It needs fuel. Life needs to be fueled, and it uses up that fuel very quickly, and it needs more, right? And the more we're alive, the more we use up that energy, and we need more of it. It's thirsty, and that's represented by the Aravos. The Aravos are thirsty. They're thirsty for water. Without water, they would dry up, as we know, very quickly, and cease to fulfill their functions as, good Aravos. Aravos are thirsty. And these are the properties, basic properties of life that are represented by the Arba Minim. We have the vertical growth of the lulav. We have the teeming activity of the hadassim. We have the beauty of the esrog. And we have the thirst, the thirst of life that's represented by the Aravos. And we bring all of them together in the mitzvah of Arba Minim to say that all of this life, all of life itself, is a Kadosh Baruch Hu, comes from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. One of the most basic things that we do is to say that everything that we have is from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But the most basic thing that we have, and the most basic element of our declaration that what we have is from Hashem, is life itself. The Sefer Yetzirah says that there's nothing higher, there's nothing higher than oneg. Oneg meaning pleasure. And there's nothing lower, there's nothing more base, nothing lower than nega. Right? Nega meaning a something that is a plague or a nega, right? Something that an infliction of leprosy or whatever it might be, a nega, right? So there's nothing higher than oineg, and nothing lower than nega. And oineg, by the way, and nega are also expressions of life, meaning oineg, pleasure, is when we feel the most alive, right? When a person experiences pleasure, that's when he feels the most alive. And nega is this infliction, which is an element of death within life, something which is inflicted, skin that's dead, this nega tsaras, right? Something which represents death within life. And Dorshei Rishuma, this is brought down in many Sfarim, right? They explain that in Gan Eden, we have three elements of Gan Eden, right? There's a Nahar, which is Yotzei Mi Eden, right? The Nahar is the river. The river comes forth from Eden, which is the source, this Eden, source of pleasure, the source, whatever it is. And then it comes and it waters the Gan, right? Umashke et Hagan, right? So you have the Nahar, which comes from Eden, and then it waters the Gan. But there's two ways of perceiving what's going on. The correct way, the right way to see what's going on here is oneg. What's oneg? Eden. First Eden, that's the source. Then Nahar. The Nahar carries, it transmits, it's the channel that takes from the source, and then the Gan. And that's where Adam HaRishon is placed, in the Gan. And he has to understand that there's a source for all of this bounty. All of this goodness comes from a source, right? And that's Oineg. Oineg is Eden, Nahar, and Gan. But the way that you can skew it, if you get it wrong, then Chas v'Shalom, you can perceive the same reality as a nega, right? What's nega? Nega means that you make a separation, right? The Nahar is independent, right? There's a nega. The Nahar is independent. That gives you your Gan, and that's independent of the Eden, which is somewhere there, but it's not related to what I have, right? That's the Koichi ve'otzem yodim. So there's nothing higher than Oineg, and there's nothing lower, there's nothing more base, there's nothing worse than Nega. And that's the idea of relating life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What we have, everything relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but life more than anything else. And when we take the Arba Minim, what we do, the Gemara says, Rav Yochanan says that the Arba Minim Na'nuim, right? We go up and down, and we go to the four directions of the world. And says Rav Yochanan, we're miyached shem shamayim, right? We take the four meaning, and we're miyached shem shamayim with this life. That all of this life is a yichud of shem shamayim. Another mandama there, Rav Yochanan ben Nuri maybe, or another mandama there, says that no, that the Arba Minim are like a tefilla, right? To stop to stop floods and to stop bad things that will happen. But the truth is that they're both. When life itself turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in two languages, it turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in recognizing the source, and it turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a tefillah, in a davening. And that's what we do with the Arba Minim. When do we shake the Arba Minim? This is when our musical accompaniment in the morning gets a little bit broken, because we have to shake the Arba Minim. So the first time is in Hodel Hashem Ki Tov, Ki Le'olam Chastoi. We give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the second time is Ana Hashem Oshiana, is in davening. That's when we shake the Dalet Minim. We take the Dalet Minim and we shake them when? To give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to recognize that all of life comes from Him, and to daven to Him, to give us life. Ana Hashem Oshiana. We don't shake the Dalet Minim in Ana Hashem Hatzlichana, only in Ana Hashem Oshiana. So the well-known vort, I think it's a little bit humorous, but it's a nice vort. The well-known vort is that you don't change for Hatzlacha. You don't make major changes. You don't move yeshivas and you don't move house just for a bit more success. But you need to change yeshiva or to move house when you need a Yeshua, when you need a salvation. So you don't shake things up just for a little bit more hatzlacha. You shake things up when you need a salvation, a redemption. But that's a vault. But what's the truth? Why do we actually shake the Dalet Minim only for Hoshia and not for Hatzlicha? I think that the truth is that whenever we speak about Hoshia, when we speak about Yeshua, then we speak about life. Right? Yeshua is life itself. When we need a salvation, when we need to be saved, then we're speaking about life itself. Hatzlacha can be many things. Can be parnasa, can be fitness, can be winning a competition, can be many things, can be relationships, can be a lot of good things, very important things, but it's not life itself. When do we shake the Dalet Minim? When we speak about life itself, when we speak about Hoshiana, Ana Hashem Hoshiana, then we shake the Dalet Minim. And if we look at the Midrashim, we know that there are a number of different Midrashim that speak about the Dalet Minim. One of the Midrashim, I guess the most well-known of all of them, is that it represents different parts of Klal Yisrael, right? We have the one that has both taste and smell, the big tzaddikim, and we have the Rishaim on the other side that don't have neither smell nor taste, and then we have the ones in the middle that have one or the other. And we bring them all together. Part of the achdus of Sukkah is that we bring them all together in our hand. That's one midrash. But there are many other midrashim also. One of them is that it represents different limbs of the body, right? There's the heart and there's the other limbs. Won't go into it. Another midrash is that it represents different expressions of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? The esrog is a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the lulav is a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and so on and so forth. And all of these ideas, ultimately, we bring them together and we're miyachid Hashem in all of them, in the expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the different elements of Klal Yisrael, in the different parts of man. We take the meaning, we put them together, and we're miyachid Shem Hashem through putting them together in all the ruches Hashemayim, like I said before. On the one hand, as a designation, as a recognition that everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and on the other hand, as a prayer, because life is also a prayer, right? A need tefilla, right? My life itself is a hope, is a prayer, is an anticipation of a better future, of that the next year should be a better year. And I'll end with one final idea of the Dalet Minim. The Arizal says that there's a special virtue of taking the Dalet Minim inside the Sukkah. And I think that Sukkah and Dalet Minim complement one another in bringing the message of Sukkah to a complete message, to one message that has different elements. Because Sukkah, on the one hand, is a unique mitzvah. Sukkah is a mitzvah in which everything that we do becomes a mitzvah. We just live regular lives, and our regular lives that we live, meaning we eat and we sleep and we're mitayel. Mitayel doesn't mean we go for a stroll necessarily. It just means we sit there doing nothing, and that itself becomes a mitzvah, right? Just by doing it in the sukkah. There's no other mitzvah that relates to just doing everyday life, that everything becomes a mitzvah, with perhaps the exception of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Just by living in Eretz Yisrael, you do all your regular stuff, and your regular stuff becomes a mitzvah because you're doing it in Eretz Yisrael. But Sukkah gives that makes it even more pronounced. You live a regular life, and doing your everyday stuff becomes a mitzvah. Meaning, it's very passive. You're not doing anything special. You're sitting in the Sukkah, and you're surrounded by the Tzilasa de Menusa, right? As it were, your presence in the location of the Sukkah that represents this trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that itself makes everything into a mitzvah. But the Dalet Minim tell us that it's not enough. On the one hand, yes, faith is everything, right? Emunah, trust, giving our trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognizing that everything comes from Hashem, that's a fundamental to what being Jewish is all about. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. But on the other hand, there's also the minim. And the Dalet minim is when we take things into our own hands. When it's not enough to just live our regular life and say that everything that we have is a part of that relationship of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We also need to take things into our own hands. We need to feel, we need to sense the things that we take in the world. And that's mitzvahs. On the one hand, we have emunah, we have the trust, the basic relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that's expressed in the sukkah. But on the other hand, we have a purpose, and that purpose is to take everything that's in the world and to bring it in, to bring it into that relationship, to bring it into that mindset. And that requires all of the mitzvahs. And these are two different parts of the Torah. The Torah has, on the one hand, all of the history of the Jewish people. It's a history of a relationship. It's a history of living with God, living with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But on the other hand, the Torah also has mitzvahs. And those mitzvahs are giving an expression of that history, of that living with a Kadosh Baruch Hu within specific aspects of the world. And here we take the different aspects of the plant world, right? The world of plants, aspects that represent life, that represent this most basic element of what it is to be alive, to be living. And we bring them into the circle. We bring them into this mindset of trust, a mindset of relationship, a mindset of designating, of recognizing that everything comes from a Kadosh Baruch Hu and anticipation of his goodness, of his giving us the bounty for the year to come. So that's how I wanted to a little bit to extend what we spoke about yesterday to the area of the Dalet Minim. And Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick it up for another aspect of Sukkot. We'll keep you in suspense. Don't want people to know what they're getting into. So thank you very much.
For you.
We'll go to Myris. Thank you.